To this Tuesday's InPower Coffee Break with Priyanka Komala, who's been with us before, and we're glad to have her back to talk about professional networking and dispel some myths about it, and talk about how to do it effectively and naturally and authentically. Just want to remind everybody that we meet here every Tuesday from 1 to 1:30 Eastern, and you can find out about upcoming shows at coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com. And we invite you to come into the conversation as a viewer, and then if you want to chat, ask questions, we can always promote you into being on the call with us directly and have a conversation. We love to do that. And we always talk about topics about surviving and thriving in the workplace and really being empowered in the workplace, whether you're a leader of a team, whether you're on a team, whether you're running an organization as its leader, or from a organizational development and human resources perspective. You know, a lot of different angles to come at leadership, personal leadership, and just being effective and successful in your work life. And that, of course, including your life. So, Mary, why don't you kick it off by reintroducing Priyanka to us? And I think she's got something exciting coming up. You can share with us too.
Yes. So to give some background on Priyanka, when she was 5, she stepped on her first stage and gave an impromptu speech about an airplane. And this excitement never left her, and as she went to become a distinguished speaker. Although she had followed the cultural expectation of getting a master's to become an engineer and technologist, Priyanka knew she wanted to make a bigger impact. She wanted a seat at the table to help others, so she got her MBA. A distinguished Toastmaster, Priyanka enjoys using technology to drive business strategically. Her focus is on leadership to make impact and inspire trust. At the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, Priyanka is responsible for creating and delivering the web strategy and future technology direction for a $30 million division. Priyanka graduated from Anna University with a degree in engineering and ranked top 5 amongst 15,000 students in the state of Tamil Nadu, India. She holds a master's degree in computer science from American University and an MBA from the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. She tries new things weekly like yoga, dancing, and writing, and ask her sometime how she survives hiking trips. She enjoys sharing insights, happiness, personal growth, entrepreneurship, women's issues, and the potential of STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and has been featured on InPower and Hello Giggles. And you can find her at her blog, Facebook, Twitter, and on LinkedIn. And she's also going to be speaking at the World of Women Festival, which is a global movement of festivals that celebrates women as a force for positive change. And this is going to be on October 8th at 12:30 p.m. So if you can go to the wowbaltimore.org site, and that's wow-baltimore.org. And you can see more information about her and that event there. So welcome, Priyanka.
Thank you, Mary, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Dana, again for the opportunity to speak to the InPower audience.
No problem. I love having you on because you are in so many ways a example of what it means to be in power. And I mean that from the standpoint that I don't actually know you personally all that well, but the way that you have offered yourself to our community, the way that both in written form here, you know, verbally as a participant and also as a speaker, you know, it's very clear that, you know, you are pursuing your own personal brand. You're being very intentional about building your personal brand, and you are learning what that means for Priyanka along the way. And so much of what InPower is that, right? Which is kind of finding your internal path that feels authentic to you, to all these things. So congratulations very much on the speaking opportunity. And I wanted to start with, you know, your experience. Like, how did networking help you arrive at that opportunity? You know, we've talked before about networking, but I'd like us to go into a little more depth about, you know, what did that really look like in terms of, for each of us, you know, getting something we wanted. What role did networking play in that? So let's start with the WOW speaking opportunity.
And I think WOW is a perfect example of the networking opportunity. So let me give you some context behind it. I love speaking and sharing insights on things that have worked for me, things that haven't worked for me, so that people can learn from those experiences. And I think the best part is when you go with no expectations, that's when amazing things happen. I always wanted to get an opportunity to speak on stage to a huge audience, but I had no clue about how do I do it, when do I do it, what's the strategy behind it. But then as you keep talking with like-minded women who are about supporting each other, and somewhere down the lane, they know that, hey, this Priyanka, and she's always interested in trying out something new about sharing her insights. And that's how, they think about me at the back of their mind. And it's never like going and asking them right up front saying, hey, there's an opportunity, please give it to me. Or, you're not speaking to them on those lines. But then for Wow Opportunity, it's more about through one of my mentoring programs that I was part of. My mentor is part of the Network 2000 Leadership Program. It's based out of Baltimore. It's a 1-year structured program, which is again focused on empowering women leaders. My mentor knew about this opportunity and she was like, Priyanka is good at writing and maybe she could help them promote this event through her social media channels. And that's how they came to me, the people behind WOW. And then I told them, hey, by the way, I also love to speak. And they said, hey, this is a perfect opportunity. Why don't you be one of the speakers and you have a wonderful story to share? I think that's how magical connections happen. And for me, I think the best part is things happen down the lane. So you build those connections and when opportunities come up, people eventually find you and they make it happen for you.
I love that story. I want to call out a couple of things that you said that I think we often forget when we go into a networking situation. So you did say going into it with no expectations, but that's not the same as having no intentions, right? I mean, you had intentions to make connections, to find up, I'm putting words in your mouth, you can tell me how right I am, but to make connections, but then also to put out to the people that you're meeting the things you enjoy doing, the kind of things you're looking for in terms of new opportunities, in this case, a speaking opportunity, but if you were looking for a new job, it would be an opportunity to talk about that. So having no expectations, so many people say, well, if I don't have any expectations, I don't expect anything, well, then I don't know what to say. Well, it's like, well, you still want things. You can want them without expecting you're going to get them and then be happy with what you get. And like you said, if you have no expectations, anything you get is exciting, right? It's like creating a surprise opportunity for yourself. And I think many times when we go into a networking opportunity, we get these things confused. We think if I have an intention to tell people I'm looking for a job and find a job connection, if that didn't happen, it was a waste of my effort. And your example kind of shows that, it's not a waste of your effort because you may be building a connection that down the road will deliver you what you want.
And you brought it up very well and you articulated it very well as Dana. When you said having no expectations versus intentions, I definitely have intentions when I'm walking into a room or meeting anyone, because that's part of your aspirations, right? I no longer call them aspirations or ambitions in my life. I call them intentions because they're much more powerful that way. Yep. And I think it's a fine line thinking what expectation versus intention is. With expectations, I think you set yourself up for disappointments because you're expecting someone to do something right there, then and there for you. With intentions, it's more like you're sending feelers to them saying, hey, this is what I enjoy doing. I love to speak. I love to lead a team. I'm in for exciting opportunities and trying to figure out what's the next challenge I can address. I think those are the ways intentions can be very powerful. So people get a sense of the story behind it rather than saying, I need a speaking opportunity or I need to be on a talk show, Dana. It's how you build those connections and trying to find value for both of them. So it's more like a mutual symbiotic relationship that I see. I'm happy to do this for somebody else. And hey, if an opportunity pops up, there's always this intention to make it happen though. So, definitely, I think it's just a personal way for me to keep myself more balanced in terms of thinking about expectations versus intentions.
And what you're doing when you do that, and you've obviously done it very successfully, is you separated the how from the what a little bit. So you know what you want, that's your intention, but you're open to receiving it in many different ways. It's not like you have to go to one networking event and have it happen there, or else you don't want it anymore, or you failed at it. Like you're open to many different avenues to get that thing to you. And that's really important because none of us control everything else, right? So we can't, we can't be sure that when we want X, if we do X, Y, and Z, we'll get it. It's never quite that clear. And so when you open yourself up to multiple ways of achieving it, and looking at networking as one of those tools to, help you find your path between what you want and where you are, then networking is a lot more effective than if you just say, well, I'm going to go to that event, and if I don't get anything out of it, I'll declare it and my effort to network a failure. And so I just appreciate that about what you're saying, is that you're seeing networking as one of many ways that you can achieve the things that you want. It's obviously working for you.
Yeah, and I think it's a very incremental process, so you can't really figure out and everything about networking and say that you're an expert at it, because it's always a learning process. As you meet new people, everybody has a different personality, and the setting of the event, there are a lot of nuances that go into it when you just walk into a room. And sometimes even I feel those jitters saying, why am I even at this event? But I think it's just part of the process that everybody has to go through in order to get through an event and meet new people. But I still have inhibitions. Even today, when I get invited to an event, I think twice sometimes, because not everybody's cut for it, right? Even though you love doing it on a regular basis. So I think it just happens, and sometimes things happen for the best.
Yeah, and you wrote a piece for us a while back that I really liked about, it's making human connection, because sometimes you go to a networking event, you're nervous, you don't know anybody, you're not quite sure how to plug in or connect. And so all of a sudden you're sort of like, well, what does success look like here? And what I loved about the piece you wrote for us was you were saying success happens when you make a personal connection. And I would take that one step farther, which is that when I go to a networking event, I do look to make personal connections, or, personal connection on a kind of a human level. I want to walk away with a minimum of one follow-up that looks to me like it's, the kind of person I want in my network for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's something in particular I'm hoping to get in the near future, a client or a connection to XYZ kind of person, or whatever, something to help one of my children get an internship. That's been some of my objectives in networking. And if I leave making multiple human connections, passing out cards where those connections are, and making one connection that I personally want to follow up, that I'm excited about, to me, that's success, because it takes that principle of making connection and then we act on it. Those people aren't really in our network if we haven't exchanged information and there's no real follow-up that you can envision. I mean, sometimes you get on their LinkedIn, and I found for myself, I was really good early on making connections. I wasn't good following up. And so then when I had an intention, I was kind of like, oh, I wonder where I go. So connecting taking action on achieving what you want, connecting that to the objective of making a connection, kind of brought networking to me into a space where I've really felt like, oh, I can do this. I can walk into a group of people and just not leave till I find one person I want to follow up on. And as soon as I found that person, I give myself permission to leave. If I'm not enjoying myself or I have something else to do.
That's very true. Mary, do you have anything to add based on your experience?
Yeah, I could say like there's some events I know I've been to, some work out really well, and there's some that are just, I'll scope it out. And if it's not, like, I don't think I'm going to meet the people that I'm kind of looking for. But then again, sometimes I go to events where I just kind of float, right? I'm just kind of in there. I have some intentions of things in general and see what kind of conversations transpire. And sometimes it's just not, the vibe isn't right. Now, if the vibe's not right, I give it like 20 minutes. And if things aren't happening and I don't know anybody, time to move it along and do something else, because maybe this is not the best use of my time. But I
think that's fair, by the way. That's totally fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to one event and nothing was vibing. Like, it was like, I was like, these aren't people. Like in other events, I went to one particular place in Dallas, where they have networking events frequently. And usually I meet a lot of people at these events, and I wasn't, right? And it was like, but the people were not people I was vibing with. It was like a whole very different event. And I was like, you know what? And I saw someone I knew. I'm like, is it just me? And they're like, no. No, this isn't our crowd, right? It's not your crowd. And I think maybe it's the tribe thing too. Like, it sounds touchy-feely. Sometimes it's good to go out of your tribe, but sometimes, and tribe could be a loose phrase, so to speak.
And you know what the best thing, Mary, is you get to learn more about yourself.
Yeah.
Things that you like to do as part of networking and the kind of people that you attract as part of your networking process. It's interesting. I was reading a New York Times bestseller that was written by Tony Hsieh, CEO of Zappos, and he talks about networking and his perspectives that I want to share with our audience here. He says he never carries business cards with him. So when he goes to a networking event, irrespective of him being the CEO, he speaks to anybody who's at the event, no matter what their ranks are. And then he tries to understand the story behind each one of them. And he says there's an incredible personal story for each one of them. And that's how you make those connections, right? You meet somebody and somebody's neighbor does something that might be useful for your company. And he said that's where a lot of his magical connections happen. And he says it almost takes around 2 to 3 years for those connections to blossom into more meaningful business-oriented opportunities.
I think that's very good advice. And I challenge myself always, whoever I'm talking to in any circumstance, but particularly in a networking event where I don't know the people, I challenge myself to find one thing about them that I think is interesting, and then find a way to share that with them. I think it's interesting that you have a neighbor that does this or whatever. And that's how I make the connection. But I wanted to speak to the other point you said, which is like, he was saying it takes several years. And one of the things that I recommend to people often to test the power of their current network is to, have an intention, something you need or want. You want a recommendation on a vendor, or you want advice on something in the professional sphere or something else, or whatever. Have something that you'd like some input on. And then reach out to your network, either, go on LinkedIn and send a message to everybody, or go to just particular people you think that could help you, or go to an event and say, I'm looking for advice on X, and, see what happens and do it as kind of a test. And, I have a number of things that I'm always thinking about. Well, I'd like to get some input on this, that I'm always testing my network with. And it amazes me how every time the network works in a different way. So I think, person A, B, and C is going to have the answer, but the answer comes from person Z, and recently I just hired a subcontractor who now I'm working with as to distribute a product through, a service through, that came as a result of a connection that I've had for probably 15 years. I've worked with her on and off. She's never really been a professional connection, but as soon as I said, hey, I'm looking for somebody that does this, she goes, got him. Here's the email, and bam, I had a subcontractor and now a new business relationship. And it never fails to amaze me how I cannot predict who will be able to help me, but it doesn't matter because I know the network will be able to help me.
And that's very true. And helping people understand more about themselves, I think that's a great quality. And people would admire you for doing something for them without them asking for it, right? Because most of us don't really ask for feedback on, tell me something interesting about myself. So it's always nice to do that for them. And something else that I also try to do is at events, I obviously still carry my business cards with me. And when we exchange business cards, before then, I try to understand why they're here at the event, what drives them, and what are they looking for. And then probably I actually jot down notes as a way. When I look for their business cards, I just write at the back of the business card. So people find it interesting and sometimes intriguing as to what is she jotting down. But that gives you a very personalized connection because probably you're the only person who's doing it for them. Most of the times people just swap business cards without even looking at them. But then I take a moment, and this is based on a lot of literature that I've learned about networking as well. You take the business cards and look at it for a moment and, try to reflect on it and respond back to the person who gave it, and then turn to the back of the card and just jot down something, maybe things that they're looking for, and say, hey, maybe there's a follow-up and let me just make a quick note of it for myself.
So I want to dispel another myth, but before we move on, before we do that, It strikes me, I just want to summarize the myth I think we're dispelling here, a couple of them. One is that intention and expectation are tied, right? That you kind of have to be open. And so there's the myth that if I go to an event, I have to get something out of it, or it was a waste of time. And that's a myth, networking is not transactional. You build it over time. Another myth is that, you can just go in, kind of pass out your cards and make connections, right? I mean, the connections that pay off tend to be the ones that are personal connections. And I want to say there, it's amazing to me how many times I've gone to a networking event, did the card exchange like you're talking about, right? And someone says, "Oh, I know someone who's perfect for that," or I can pass you on to this person, and they make a commitment there in the conversation, but it doesn't pan out. And the reason it doesn't pan out is we didn't make enough of a personal connection for them to feel invested and go back to their office and spend the time, versus those people who do have a personal connection, who feel more committed to, like, oh, I said I would do that, I'll do it. It's amazing to me how many times it's the personal connection that's real that really, pays off. And so it's not just about passing the card, it's about doing what you're doing, taking the card, making that personal connection, following up to reinforce the personal connection, and later that's what really pays off. And another thing that strikes me is that we think of networking as these events, right? And networking happens all over the place, right? It happens at your family reunion. It happens when you're just having lunch with a girlfriend or a male friend. It happens in the normal world that we live in, when we interact with people all the time. And if we think of networking as all the people we meet, all of a sudden we're doing networking all the time. We just may not be leveraging it for our professional objectives. And so some people say, well, I haven't been to a networking event, so I'm not doing any networking. It's like, well, have you been talking to people?
I hope so, right?
Exactly. And we had another guest on the show who had also written a post kind of about this, about how she had a personal connection that said, oh, I want to put you together with one of my professional connections. Turns out they were also personally connected, just never kind of had the professional conversation. And she ended up getting her dream job out of it. And, I think we all waste opportunities for professional connections in our personal lives, sometimes intentionally. And it's not all about, putting on the suit and tie and going out with a business card and getting all worked up about it. Well, so let me ask both of you, when you think about some of your professional connections that have really paid off, how many either started personally or developed personally or had a personal dimension to them?
I think it takes a lot of time. It's like you're investing in your relationships, right? And as it goes, like your personal or professional relationships, I think it takes a lot of time to build the trust in people to help you, or introducing them to another connection of theirs, because they're kind of opening up their world for you, which means they need to believe in you and what you're trying to do with them and their connections as well. So it takes a very long period of time, as far as I've seen, to build those genuine relationships. And as you rightly pointed out, it doesn't always have to be at a networking event. For example, the first boss that I worked for, I happened to meet him as part of my grad school event, and I didn't quite realize that he was working for a big software development firm. But then we were having those casual connections and conversations. And then I told him casually that, hey, I'm looking for an internship. And he was like, oh, wow, I can definitely look for, some opportunity at my place. And, that's how things happen. And as you said, it can happen anywhere. It could be in the grocery store. It could be at your hiking trip. It's just you're networking all the time as you're talking to people.
Mm-hmm. Mary, how about you?
Well, I think I tell everyone my business I built from minimal advertising. It was all really from word of mouth. So I'd say it's all networking. And this gets into kind of like before going to a network, like a networking event, and the vibe isn't there, right? So I give it like 20 minutes and I'm like, I'm out, right? It's just not there. And I kind of believe in the tribe thing. Like there's people who are like you, right? And so you meet people like, and a lot of the people I know, I've networked with people, like articles I've written, like I've done interviews, and then I get into business ventures with people, or other people I've worked with, like on projects. So I get a gig and then I work on the project and then I meet other people and I just kind of infiltrate, like a little, you know, depending on how you see it, right? It's like a little virus, like it's going everywhere. And you build it up over time. But I think there's also a clicking factor, because there's some people I've worked with, nothing ever comes of it because we don't have that factor of the click. I don't know how else to put it, because I think some people, it just works, and other people, they're not for you.
Mm-hmm. Actually, you know, that's an important point, I think, for everybody to realize, is that, you know, no, you can't be everything to everybody. You can't be everybody's best friend. You shouldn't be everybody's best friend, right? You know, there are people who reinforce who we want to be. They're able to support us in a way that's consistent and aligned with the things they care about and their values, and us with them. And then there are people that when you don't click, sometimes we take away from that, oh, it's our fault. It's my fault. You know, particularly women, I think, sometimes do this. You know, it's like, I didn't click with them, so I was obviously doing a bad job. And, you know, yeah, maybe sometimes you could have been better, but honestly, sometimes you're not clicking because there's just not, there's not a personal connection. There's not a real personal connection. You'd be forcing yourself to do it. And for people in the sales professions, you know, sometimes they have to do that to work the leads and stuff. And if you're in a sales capacity, you know, that's an easier thing to do. But in just a personal networking way, it's good to try to be able to connect with a lot of people, but you shouldn't have to force yourself to the point where you're not feeling authentic. You're not feeling like, you know, making that connection is aligned with who you are. And that's a fine line. It requires a lot of judgment. And, you know, you got to think, who do I want in my life? Who do I want in my professional network? Who do I want to work with? And be okay with just saying, okay, that's not a person that I really do click with and want to include in my close network. There's nothing wrong with that.
And Dana, to add to it, and you should be willing to accept that that's the reality that you face in the world. And not everybody's meant to be a part of the circle that you have created for yourself. So it's the stark reality, and it takes time to figure out, okay, how do I strategically build my network? And sometimes strategy works, and sometimes you just have to let go of things and go by the flow as well. So it's just a question of judgment at those moments.
Yep. And I just want to close out with some practical guidelines for, you know, people thinking about their networks. And then, so I'll just ask each of you, and then I'll share mine. Like, you know, what kinds of events, what kind of groups, what kind of opportunities do you kind of proactively seek out to expand, build, and develop and nurture your network?
So given that I belong to technology and management, I look at groups that have a mix of those. So pretty much for networking out of opportunities, I look at groups that are based locally, so I have a chance to meet them in person. And then I'm part of a lot of women-focused groups, but then you also have to be careful about building networks that include men as well as part of your sponsorship and mentorship opportunities. And that's something that I have to be more cautious about as I'm building those relationships. So I try to aim for a good balance of groups that have a diverse set of people, so that your perspectives and the kind of opportunities that might open up for you also come from different groups of people. And then you also want to have some fun groups, so it's not always professional networking, like how men develop close friendships on the golf course. So women still need to do that in ways that they are comfortable. So for me, I love to hike or do yoga or some kind of recreational activities, and you never know how connections might forge on those lines as well. So I try to have a balance of professional and then pleasure networking groups And it doesn't have to be networking at the end of the day. It's getting to know those personal stories and helping each other succeed.
Mm-hmm. It's a good way to look at it. How about you, Mary?
Let's see, I'll go to like meetups. I find those are really good. Like there's the talk, and then you can meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. Again, some you click, and I've met some great people in my network through those events, and then some no. You have a conversation, and you're like, oh my God, kill me now. And both of you are saying it. I'm not saying like it's just me that's saying it. It's like the other person is like, get me away from her. She's crazy. So I'll do those, or there's some women events I'll go to. Like I really enjoy, there's a women technology event that happens every month in Dallas. That's really good. And there's also ladies that UX. It's a really good event. It's pretty structured with the talk and the networking after. And then you get to see faces and you get to know people. I'd say it's mostly through those types of things. I'll sometimes go to entrepreneur events. I stay away from the big events. I think they're overwhelming and they're not very personal. And then the other way I network, and it's going to sound weird, is LinkedIn. When I need to find someone to help me with something, I believe it or not, I go to LinkedIn. And I use my first tier and second tier connections and have found some really great people and some really good resources. I've worked with them on projects, and now like we talk all the time.
That's cool. Yeah, no, LinkedIn is an excellent source for that. And, there's a lot of discussion about your LinkedIn network and should you allow people into your network that you don't really know. And, when it comes to things like that, when you're going to be reaching out to your network, sometimes you do want to connect with people you don't know real well, but that LinkedIn connection gives you an excuse to reach out to them. Of course, you want to be selective about who you add to your network, but LinkedIn's a great place to network. And I would add in sort of a different dimension to what you both have said, from the standpoint that, there are a number of organizations, professional associations, local groups, the chambers of commerce, the local groups that are kind of on Meetup, or maybe they got together before Meetup, so they're not using Meetup. And I subscribe to the newsletters and to the event listings for the ones that are kind of in those topical areas that overlap with mine, like you mentioned. And then my take on it is I kind of look at my energy level basically every week. And I say, how much energy do I have for what? And so that'll include, I want to network with some girlfriends because I need some girlfriend time, or, male professional colleagues that I haven't seen in a little while. So that I do make sure there's some for one-on-one time. And then do I have energy this week based on everything that's going on for an event? And if so, then I kind of scan those events and say, all right, what's going on now that would be fun for me and a good investment of my time? And of course, sometimes I do it a few weeks out, but basically I do it in a way that's balancing my energy so that a fair amount of my networking is actually giving to me. It's interacting with people in a way that I enjoy, with people that I enjoy. And then there's some of it where I'm just putting myself out there, and telling people, like we talked about, no expectation, but with intention, and see what comes back. And then whenever I have something I need or want, that's when I proactively reach out on LinkedIn or via email or the people I happen to be meeting with. And if I'm balancing my energy that way, the network gives me what I need in a variety of ways. So I think we're at our time here, and I just want to thank Priyanka for joining us yet again on this important topic, and I look forward to having you back again in the future. And thank Mary for being our technology guru this week. And thank you all for participating live and listening. Again, go to coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com to see upcoming topics, and join us when you can, and listen to the recordings when you can, and keep the conversation going. And always feel free to suggest topics or speakers that you would find interesting, and we'll get them lined up in the future. So take care, everybody, and have an InPower day.
Yeah, and thanks, Mary and Dana, for the wonderful opportunity to interact with InPower. And I hope this session was helpful in terms of takeaways that we could implement right after finishing the session.
Good. I hope so, too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.